Story number 1. The Bloody Mirror of Lady in the Snow. I've always been drawn to the enigmatic and the eerie, a trait that led me to the remote village of Yuki-no-Mura in northern Japan. Nestled deep within the snow-clad mountains, Yuki-no-Mura was a place where modernity barely touched its traditional roots. It was here that I decided to spend the winter months, seeking inspiration for my next book and, admittedly, a break from the chaos of Tokyo's relentless pace. The villagers spoke little of the outside world, their lives intertwined with ancient customs and seasonal rhythms. Yet, beneath their stoic exteriors lay whispers of a haunting legend, the Lady in the Snow. According to local lore, every winter, a woman dressed in a pristine white kimono roamed the village, leaving behind bloodied handprints on the mirrors of those she cursed. Those unfortunate enough to witness her traces were doomed to perish before the first bloom of spring. Skeptical yet intrigued, I dismissed the tales as mere superstition, a way to explain the unexplainable tragedies that befell the village each winter. However, my skepticism began to wane as the first snowflakes of December began to fall, blanketing Yuki-no-Mura in a serene yet oppressive silence. My days were spent exploring the picturesque landscapes, capturing the ethereal beauty of snow-covered temples and silent forests. The nights, however, were a different story. The isolation of the village, coupled with the relentless cold, created an atmosphere thick with tension. The villagers, though polite, kept to themselves, their eyes often clouded with unspoken fears. One evening, as I sat in the communal tea house, the warmth of the hearth offering a brief respite from the biting cold, an elderly woman named Aiko approached me. Her silver hair was neatly tied back, and her eyes, though kind, held a depth of sorrow that piqued my curiosity. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked, her voice soft yet piercing. I shook my head. "No, I'm here to write. I've heard stories about the Lady in the Snow and wanted to learn more." Aiko nodded slowly, taking a seat beside me. "It's not just a story. Many have seen her, and many have not survived. The mirrors, they are her signatures." I leaned in, eager to hear more. "What happens to those who see the bloodied handprints?" She sighed, her gaze distant. "They say the lady marks their souls. The cold intensifies, their health declines rapidly, and fear consumes them. It's as if she siphons their life force, leaving them hollow." That night, as I lay in my tatami room, the wind howling outside and snow piling against the windows, I couldn't shake Aiko's words. The next morning, driven by a mix of fear and fascination, I decided to observe the mirrors in my rented ryokan. Each room was adorned with beautiful, ornate mirrors, a reflection of traditional Japanese aesthetics. I began my routine of documenting them, noting any signs of the infamous bloodied prints. Days turned into weeks, and as the snow deepened, so did the tension within the village. One particularly frigid night, I awoke to the sound of footsteps echoing through the silent halls. Heart pounding, I reached for my flashlight and cautiously stepped out of my room. The corridor was dimly lit by lanterns, their soft glow barely piercing the darkness. As I moved through the hallway, I noticed a trail of bloodied handprints leading towards the main lounge. My pulse quickened. Had someone been injured? Or was it the work of the legendary lady? I followed the trail, each step echoing ominously. The handprints were smeared across the polished wood floors, leading me to a large mirror hanging on the far wall. My breath caught in my throat as I saw fresh, crimson smears stretching from the mirror to the doorway. The image reflected back at me was distorted, the blood seeming to move of its own accord, forming the shape of a woman in a flowing white kimono. "Stay," the mirror seemed to whisper, the letters forming a chilling message that mirrored the legend. I recoiled, backing away from the mirror, my mind racing with fear and disbelief. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the frigid room. Shadows danced along the edges of my vision, and the once beautiful decor now seemed menacing, twisted by an unseen force. Suddenly, The figure of the lady appeared behind me in the reflection. Her eyes were hollow voids, her expression devoid of any emotion but filled with an unbearable sadness. She reached out towards me, her fingers inches from my face, leaving behind a chilling sensation that froze me to the core. "You should not have seen this," she whispered, her voice a haunting melody that resonated deep within my soul. Terrified, I turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as the lady's presence grew more intense. I could feel her sorrow and rage intertwining, a deadly combination that threatened to consume me. Desperate for escape, I remembered the rituals Aiko had mentioned. With trembling hands, I began to recite the prayers she had shared, calling out for peace and forgiveness. The air around me began to shift, the oppressive cold lifting slightly as I continued my pleas. The lady's form wavered, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of longing and despair. "Release us," she begged, her voice now filled with a pleading urgency. I intensified my prayers, pouring every ounce of belief and compassion into my words. The room brightened, the shadows receding as the icy grip of the curse loosened. The lady's form began to dissolve, her presence fading into the ethereal light. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now a faint echo. "Find peace." The door swung open, the oppressive atmosphere lifted entirely. I stood there, breathless and shaken, the room returning to its serene, snow-covered beauty. The bloodied handprints had vanished, replaced by a clear reflection in the mirror. The next day, I sought out Aiko to share my harrowing experience. She listened silently, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and sorrow. "You've done well," she said softly, "but the curse lingers, bound by the tragedies of the past. You've given us a chance, but we must honor our memories to ensure peace remains." I nodded, understanding the gravity of what had transpired. The lady in the snow was not merely a curse, but a manifestation of unresolved pain and loss. By acknowledging her and her story, I had helped to lift the veil of sorrow that had bound her spirit to the mortal realm. As winter progressed, the phenomena in Yuki no Mura gradually subsided. The whispers became less frequent, the shadows less menacing. The villagers seemed to breathe easier, their eyes reflecting a newfound hope. The mirrors in my room remained pristine. The legend of the lady in the snow transformed from a tale of fear to one of compassion and remembrance. When spring finally arrived, melting the snow and bringing life back to the village, I knew my time in Yuki no Mura had profoundly changed me. The lady in the snow had found peace, her curse lifted by a blend of understanding and empathy. As I prepared to leave, Aiko handed me a small, delicate mirror, its surface smooth and unblemished. "For your journey," she said with a gentle smile, "may it remind you that even in the darkest winters, compassion can thaw the coldest of curses." Driving away from Yuki no Mura, I glanced at the mirror, its reflection showing not just my own image, but the faint, grateful smile of the lady in the snow. The legend had been rewritten not through fear, but through the power of human connection and the unwavering belief in redemption. Years later, whenever winter approaches, I reflect on my time in Yuki no Mura. The echoes of the lady's whispers serve as a haunting reminder of the thin line between legend and reality, and the enduring impact of compassion in the face of ancient curses. The story of the bloody mirror became not just a tale of horror, but a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of empathy. And sometimes, when the snow falls quietly outside my window and the world is hushed under its pristine blanket, I can almost hear the faint whispers of gratitude carried by the wind, a gentle reminder that even in the deepest winter, the warmth of understanding can break the coldest of curses. Story number 2. Echoes of the Eternal Ice. Winter in Alaska was not just a season, it was a relentless force, an omnipresent entity that shaped lives and destinies with its unforgiving grip. I had always been fascinated by the stories that echoed through the small communities dotted across the vast wilderness. Tales of survival, of nature's wrath, and of inexplicable phenomena that defied logic. But none intrigued me more than the legend of the Eternal Ice House, a place shrouded in mystery and fear, said to be cursed by the spirits of hunters who had perished in its icy embrace. I first heard about the Eternal Ice House from an old trapper named Hank, whose weathered face and piercing blue eyes held the wisdom of countless winters. He sat hunched over a steaming mug of coffee in the local diner, his voice gravelly from years of shouting against the howling winds. "You ever hear of the Ice House, Mike?" he asked, his gaze fixed on mine. "They say it's cursed. Every year, someone goes in, and they never come out the same." I nodded, unable to hide my curiosity. As a writer, I thrived on uncovering hidden truths and untold stories. The idea of exploring a haunted house in the heart of Alaska was both thrilling and terrifying. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to embark on a journey to the Eternal Ice House. I spent weeks preparing, gathering equipment, researching local legends, and speaking with anyone who had any knowledge about the cursed location. Most dismissed the tales as mere folklore, but Hank and a few others insisted there was something undeniably sinister about the house. The day I set out, the sky was a bleak gray, the snow swirling in fierce gusts that made visibility nearly impossible. My destination lay deep within the wilderness, accessible only by a narrow, treacherous path that wound through dense forests and over frozen streams. The further I ventured, the more isolated I felt, the world around me fading into a silent, snowy expanse. After hours of navigating the unforgiving terrain, I finally caught sight of the Eternal Ice House. It stood alone, a stark structure carved entirely from ice, its crystalline walls glistening ominously under the pale winter sun. The house seemed almost otherworldly, its sharp angles and smooth surfaces reflecting an eerie beauty that belied the horrors rumored to reside within. Taking a deep breath, I approached the house, my footsteps crunching on the thick layer of snow. The air was frigid, each breath a visible puff that lingered in the stillness. As I reached the entrance, a sense of foreboding settled over me. The door, intricately carved with ancient symbols, stood slightly ajar, as if inviting me into its icy depths. "Come on, Mike," I muttered to myself, pushing the door open. The interior was dimly lit by the natural light filtering through the ice walls, casting long, ghostly shadows across the spacious room. The air inside was unnaturally cold, sending shivers down my spine despite the layers of clothing I wore. I set up my equipment, a camera, a recorder, and a flashlight, determined to document any supernatural activity. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint dripping of melting ice and the distant howl of the wind outside. As I explored the house, each room revealed more of its haunting beauty. Chandeliers made of icicles, furniture sculpted from blocks of ice, and walls adorned with frost patterns that seemed to shift and change with each passing moment. Hours passed without incident, and I began to feel a growing sense of accomplishment. But as night fell, the atmosphere shifted, the temperature plummeted, and the once beautiful ice structures now seemed menacing, their shadows twisting into grotesque shapes. I heard it first as a faint whisper, barely audible over the howling wind. "Help us!" I froze, my heart racing. The voice was sorrowful, filled with an undeniable sense of pain and desperation. I glanced around, but there was no one in sight. The house felt alive, the ice walls pulsating with an unseen energy. Determined to find the source of the voice, I followed the whispers deeper into the house. In the center of the main hall stood a grand staircase, its steps made of translucent ice that seemed to glow with an ethereal light. As I ascended, the whispers grew louder, their voices intertwining into a mournful chorus. Reaching the top, I found myself in a large, circular room, the walls adorned with intricate frost carvings depicting scenes of hunting and survival. In the center of the room was a pedestal, atop which rested an old, weathered journal. My hands trembled as I reached for it, the whispers intensifying as I opened the cover. The pages were filled with desperate pleas and fragmented memories, recounting the tragic fate of the hunters who had once sought refuge in this very house. They were trapped. One entry read, "The cold is relentless, the spirits unforgiving. We can't leave, but we can't stay either. Please, someone help us find peace." A chill ran down my spine as I realized the house was not just a haunted structure, but a prison for the souls of those who had perished within its icy walls. The whispers now formed coherent sentences, their voices echoing through the room with a palpable sense of anguish. "Help us, free us from this eternal winter." I knew then that I had to do more than just document the hauntings. I had to help these lost souls find peace. Recalling the rituals I had read about in various folklore and occult texts, I began to perform a cleansing ceremony, hoping to release the spirits from their icy confinement. As I chanted, the room began to change. The oppressive cold lifted slightly, replaced by a warm, comforting energy that filled the space. The whispers softened, turning into grateful murmurs as the spirits responded to my plea. The ice walls shimmered, their once threatening presence now serene and inviting. A figure emerged from the shadows, a hunter from long ago, his eyes filled with sorrow and gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice now peaceful. "We are free." One by one, the spirits of the hunters appeared, their forms ethereal and translucent, their eyes reflecting a deep sense of relief. The house seemed to breathe a sigh of contentment, the curse lifting as the spirits found the closure they had long been denied. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the ice walls, illuminating the now peaceful interior of the eternal ice house. The oppressive atmosphere had vanished, replaced by a serene calm that spoke of new beginnings and lasting peace. I left the house that morning, the weight of the past lifted from my shoulders. The legend of the eternal ice house had been debunked. Not by debunking, but by acknowledging and honoring the souls that had been trapped within its icy confines. The house, once a symbol of tragedy and fear, now stood as a monument to resilience and the enduring power of compassion. Driving back through the Alaskan wilderness, I reflected on the experience, the haunting beauty of the house, and the spirits I had helped find peace. The snow continued to fall, each flake a reminder of the delicate balance between life and death, reality and the supernatural. The eternal ice house was no longer cursed, but its legacy remained, a testament to the thin veil that separates us from the spirits that linger in the shadows of our world. Years later, the story of my encounter with the eternal ice house became a cherished tale among locals and travelers alike. A story of courage, empathy, and the unyielding quest for truth. And sometimes, when the winter winds howl through the Alaskan wilderness and the snow blankets the land in pristine white, I can almost hear the faint whispers of gratitude carried away by the breeze, a gentle reminder that even in the darkest of places, hope and compassion can illuminate the path to peace. Story number 3. Whispers in the ice. I had always been fascinated by extremes, the coldest nights, the most isolated places, the stories that teetered on the edge of reality and myth. So when the opportunity arose to stay at the Ice Hotel in Jukkasjärvi, Sweden, couldn't resist. Built entirely from ice and snow, the hotel was a marvel of engineering and artistry, attracting tourists and thrill-seekers from around the globe. Little did I know, my fascination would soon become my nightmare. Arriving in the late afternoon, the sun was beginning its descent, casting a pale golden glow over the endless expanse of white. The air was biting cold, each breath visible in the frigid atmosphere. The Ice Hotel stood majestically against the backdrop of the northern lights, its intricate sculptures and delicate structures shimmering under the fading light. I checked in, greeted by a receptionist whose smile didn't quite reach her eyes, an unsettling feeling that I brushed aside as mere fatigue from the journey. My room was a masterpiece of ice craftsmanship. the walls etched with intricate patterns and the furniture carved from blocks of pristine ice. A thick blanket of fur covered the bed, offering some respite from the relentless cold. As night fell, I settled into my room, the silence almost deafening. The temperature plunged further, the air crisp and sharp against my skin. Around midnight, the first whisper pierced the stillness. It was faint, barely audible over the howling wind outside, but unmistakable. "Stay! Don't leave!" the voice seemed to say, echoing through the icy corridors. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I glanced around, but the room was empty, the shadows playing tricks on my weary mind. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind or my imagination, a product of the isolation and the eerie beauty surrounding me. But as the night wore on, the whispers persisted, growing slightly louder each hour. Footsteps echoed through the halls, slow and deliberate, yet no one else was around. The feeling of being watched settled over me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and inescapable. Determined to uncover the source, I ventured out into the lobby the next morning. The hotel was still deserted, the other guests having returned to their rooms for the day. I approached the reception desk, where the receptionist stood behind her icy counter, her eyes darting nervously to the entrance. "Excuse me," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "I keep hearing whispers at night and feeling like someone is watching me. Is there something I should know about the hotel?" She hesitated, her facade of professionalism cracking for a brief moment. "The Ice Hotel has its history," she replied cautiously. "Some say the spirits of those who built it still linger, unable to move on. Most guests dismiss it as local folklore, but there are those who believe otherwise." A chill ran down my spine. The thought of restless spirits roaming the icy halls was both terrifying and intriguing. "Is there anything you recommend I do? I want to enjoy my stay without fear." She offered a strained smile. "Perhaps a guided tour. Sometimes understanding the history can help ease the mind." That evening, I joined a small group of guests for the tour. Our guide, a middle-aged man named Eric, led us through the various sections of the hotel, his voice steady as he recounted the tales of its creation. Built annually by a team of artists and engineers, the Ice Hotel was a temporary masterpiece, designed to melt away with the seasons. But in its 1978 construction, something went terribly wrong. A massive blizzard had hit just as the final touches were being added, trapping the workers inside. Days turned into weeks, and the isolation and harsh conditions took a toll on their sanity. One by one, they vanished without a trace, their bodies never found, their spirits said to haunt the very ice they had sculpted. As Eric spoke, the room grew colder, the flickering candles casting long, wavering shadows. I felt a presence, a weight pressing down on me, as if the very history of the place was seeping into the present. The whispers began anew, this time louder and more urgent, filling the tour group with a collective unease. We reached the centerpiece of the hotel, a grand hall with towering ice pillars and a magnificent chandelier made entirely of icicles. Eric paused, his gaze distant. "This hall is said to be the heart of the curse. It's where the last of the workers met their fate. Some believe their spirits are bound here, forever trapped in the ice." A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, and the temperature plummeted further. The whispers turned into mournful wails, echoing through the hall. I glanced around, seeing the other guests shiver uncontrollably, fear etched on their faces. Eric continued, oblivious to the mounting tension. As the years passed, attempts to renovate or expand the hotel were met with inexplicable accidents and tragedies. The curse became a part of its legacy, a reminder of the thin line between creation and destruction. We moved on, but the oppressive atmosphere lingered, the whispers haunting our every step. Back in my room that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. "Stay! Don't leave!" Sleep eluded me as I lay shivering under the thick fur blanket. the cold seeping into my bones. I decided to explore the hotel further, hoping to find answers. Equipped with a flashlight and a determination to uncover the truth, I navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the ice floors crunching under my feet. As I reached the grand hall again, the whispers intensified, swirling around me like a malevolent storm. I approached the center, where the chandelier cast eerie reflections on the walls. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, the flashlight flickering and dying. Panic surged through me as I fumbled to turn it back on, but the beam remained dim. In the darkness, I felt a presence, a cold, oppressive force pressing against me, suffocating and relentless. The whispers turned into agonized screams, the voices of the trapped spirits crying out for release. I stumbled back, trying to escape the room, but the corridors seemed to twist and shift, trapping me in an icy labyrinth. Desperate, I remembered Eric's words about honoring their memory. Gathering every ounce of courage, I began to speak, my voice shaking but resolute. "I'm sorry for what happened. I honor your sacrifice. Please, let me help you find peace." The temperature began to rise, the oppressive darkness lifting as the spirits responded to my plea. The whispers softened, turning into grateful murmurs, the tortured souls finally finding solace. The grand hall glowed with a gentle light, the shadows receding as the curse began to dissolve. Exhausted but hopeful, I made my way back to my room, the whispers now a distant memory. The ice hotel stood silent, this dark history finally acknowledged and honored. As dawn broke, the northern lights illuminated the snow-covered landscape, a symbol of renewal and peace. Leaving Helltown, I felt a profound sense of closure. The curse of the ice hotel had been lifted, not through force, but through understanding and compassion. The restless spirits were finally free, their voices no longer echoing through the icy halls. But the experience left an indelible mark on me, a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the power of empathy to bridge the gap between worlds. Years later, I still think back to that winter in Helltown, the haunting beauty of the ice hotel, and the whispers that once filled the night. It taught me that even in the coldest, darkest places, there is hope for redemption and peace. And sometimes, when the northern lights dance across the Arctic sky, I like to believe that the spirits of the ice hotel are finally at rest, their whispers now a gentle breeze carrying their stories to the stars. Story number 4. Echoes of Flight 401. Winter 1972 was unforgiving. The Everglades stretched out like an endless, frozen wasteland, a stark contrast to the vibrant life teeming beneath its surface. As a young flight attendant with Eastern Airlines, I had heard the rumors about Flight 401, the ill-fated journey that had ended in tragedy. But nothing could have prepared me for the nightmares that would follow. I remember that December night vividly. The sky was a blanket of deep indigo, pierced by the twinkling lights of distant cities. Our flight, a routine trip from Miami to New York, was fully booked with passengers eager to reach their destinations. The cabin buzzed with anticipation, the hum of conversation and laughter filling the air as we soared above the clouds. As we approached the Everglades, the weather took a sudden turn. Thick fog rolled in, enveloping the plane in a suffocating embrace. Visibility dropped to mere feet, and the air grew heavy with an unnatural stillness. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, a hint of unease underlying his usual confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some turbulence as we pass over the Everglades. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Minutes later, the unthinkable happened. An explosion rocked the aircraft, jolting us from our reverie. Screams filled the cabin as chaos erupted around me. I tried to stay calm, guiding passengers to safety, but the damage was catastrophic. The plane spiraled downward, the ground rushing up to meet us with terrifying speed. The last thing I remember was the blinding flash of flames and the piercing cries of those around me. Then, darkness swallowed everything. When I awoke, I was lying on the cold, unforgiving ground of the Everglades. Smoke billowed into the sky, the remnants of the crash smoldering around me. I struggled to my feet, disoriented and in agony. The wreckage of Flight 401 lay scattered, twisted metal and broken glass glinting ominously in the dim light. Rescue teams arrived hours later, their searchlights cutting through the fog. Survivors were few and gravely injured. As we were airlifted to safety, the haunting images of that night etched themselves into my mind, forever altering my perception of the skies. Months passed, and the Everglades seemed to reach into every corner of my life. I couldn't escape the feeling that something was watching me, following me from one flight to the next. It started subtly, strange noises in the dead of night, shadows flitting across the walls of my apartment. But soon, the manifestations grew more sinister. On a late-night flight from Chicago to Los Angeles, I felt a chill descend upon the cabin. The lights flickered erratically, casting eerie patterns on the seats. Passengers began to murmur uneasily. Glancing around with apprehension, I approached a group of elderly women, offering reassurance, but their eyes were wide with fear. "It's the spirits of Flight 401. One of them whispered, her voice trembling. "They're here to reclaim what was lost." I dismissed it as mere superstition, but deep down, I couldn't shake the unease. That night, as the plane cruised over the Everglades once more, the air grew thick with tension, the temperature plummeted, and an oppressive silence settled over the cabin. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, an unfamiliar voice piercing the stillness. "Stop the plane! Remember us!" Panic erupted as passengers screamed, and the crew struggled to maintain control. The captain's voice was barely audible over the chaos. "We're experiencing some technical difficulties. Please remain calm and stay seated." But the situation was far from normal. The shadows in the cabin seemed to deepen, twisting into grotesque shapes that moved with malevolent intent. I felt an invisible force pressing down on me, suffocating my very being. The whispers grew louder, morphing into anguished cries that echoed through the aisles. Suddenly, the cabin lights extinguished, plunging us into darkness. The only illumination came from the emergency lights, casting long, distorted shadows that danced eerily on the walls. I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness, only to reveal the ghostly apparitions of those lost in Flight 401. Their eyes were wide with terror, their mouths open in silent screams. One by one, they floated down the aisles, their ethereal forms flickering like faulty projections. The sight was enough to send me into a state of paralysis, my mind racing to comprehend the horror before me. "Help us find peace," the spirits wailed, their voices blending into a cacophony of despair. Desperate to regain control, I approached the cockpit, the door seemingly impossible to open. The intercom crackled again, the voice now filled with desperation. "Remember our story. Don't let it be forgotten." I knew then that the apparitions were tied to the very parts salvaged from Flight 401, scattered across the globe. Each component carried a piece of the tragedy, binding the spirits to the skies and haunting those who encountered them. The curse of Flight 401 was real, a malevolent force that sought to perpetuate its suffering by intertwining with other flights. Determined to break the cycle, I delved into the history of the crash, uncovering forgotten rituals and ancient prayers designed to honor the dead and release their spirits. I enlisted the help of a local priest, Father Michael, who specialized in exorcisms and spiritual healing. Together, we began to perform the rituals on every flight I worked, hoping to appease the restless souls and free them from their eternal torment. Each night was a battle against the unseen forces, the spirits of Flight 401 pushing back with increasing ferocity. The apparitions became more aggressive, their attempts to reclaim the living growing more desperate and violent. One fateful night, as I prepared for another flight, I felt a presence behind me. Turning slowly, I faced the ghostly figure of the pilot of Flight 401, his eyes hollow with endless sorrow. "Why can't you let us go?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the cabin. We are trapped in this endless loop of pain and loss. I knelt before him, tears streaming down my face. I'm sorry for what happened. I'm trying to help you find peace. The air around us crackled with energy as the other spirits gathered, their forms flickering like faulty projections. Father Michael began the final rites, his voice strong and unwavering as he chanted prayers of release and forgiveness. The cabin was filled with a blinding light, the oppressive darkness dissolving into a serene calm. The spirits of Flight 401 began to fade, their anguish replaced by a peaceful stillness. The curse was lifted, the cycle of suffering finally broken. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting a warm glow on the cabin. The weight of the past lifted, leaving behind a sense of closure and healing. I left Eastern Airlines shortly after that night, the memories of Flight 401 forever etched into my soul. The experience taught me the profound impact of tragedy and the enduring power of compassion. Though the spirits had found peace, their story served as a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the shadows that linger long after the storm has passed. Years later, whenever I gaze up at the night sky, I remember the whispers of Flight 401 and the souls who sought solace in the heavens. Their presence may have been fleeting, but their legacy remains, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all, even beyond death. Story number 5. Shadows over Helltown. I've always been fascinated by the unexplained, drawn to places where the veil between reality and the supernatural seemed perilously thin. So when I heard about Helltown, Ohio, a small, forgotten village nestled deep within the Appalachians, my curiosity was instantly piqued. The locals spoke in hushed tones about the town's dark history, especially during the harsh winter months when eerie phenomena plagued the area. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to spend a winter night in Helltown, armed with my camera, notebook, and an insatiable need for answers. Driving through the winding mountain roads, the landscape transformed before my eyes. Snow-covered pines stood like silent sentinels against the biting wind, and the sky was a perpetual gray, heavy with impending storms. Helltown emerged from the trees like a ghostly apparition, its quaint houses blanketed in snow, windows darkened against the cold. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, broken only by the distant howl of a lone wolf. I checked into the old inn on Main Street, its wooden facade creaking under the weight of countless winters. The innkeeper, an elderly woman named Agnes, greeted me with a wary smile. Her eyes, though kind, held a depth of sorrow that hinted at the town's troubled past. "Welcome to Helltown," she said softly. "Not many come here, especially in the winter. If you're looking for stories, you're in the right place." I thanked her and settled into my room, the warmth of the fireplace a stark contrast to the frigid air outside. As night fell, the wind picked up, rattling the windows and sending snow swirling in fierce patterns against the glass. I decided to take a walk around the town, hoping to capture the haunting beauty of Helltown on camera. The streets were deserted, the silence oppressive. Streetlights cast long shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own, distorting the familiar into something grotesque and otherworldly. As I walked past the old church, I felt a chill run down my spine. The windows were shattered, and the doors hung ajar, creaking with every gust of wind. Legends spoke of restless spirits and curses that plagued the town, and tonight, I could feel their presence pressing in from every direction. I reached the town square, where an ancient fountain stood dry and cracked. The statue at its center, a figure of a man with outstretched arms, seemed to watch over the deserted plaza with a haunting gaze. As I lifted my camera to take a photo, I heard it, a faint whisper, barely audible over the howling wind. "Stay!" I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The whisper seemed to come from all around me, yet there was no one in sight. I scanned the area, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, but saw nothing. Shaking off the unease, I continued my walk, the whisper lingering in my mind like a persistent echo. Back at the inn, I reviewed the photos I had taken, hoping to find something unusual. Most were ordinary shots of the snow-covered houses and barren trees. But one caught my attention. In the center of the town square, the shadow of a man stood beside the fountain, his outline blurry and indistinct. His presence was chilling, a stark reminder of the legends I had come to investigate. Determined to understand what I was witnessing, I approached Agnes the next morning. Over a cup of steaming tea, I shared my findings. "You saw him, didn't you?" Agnes asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I replied. "The shadowy figure by the fountain. Is there a story behind him?" Agnes sighed, her eyes clouded with memories. "That's Samuel Whitaker, the founder of Helltown. He was a kind man, loved by everyone. But one winter, tragedy struck. His family disappeared without a trace, and he was found wandering the streets, his mind shattered by grief. Some say he cursed the town, binding his spirit to the land, ensuring that no one would ever forget their suffering." I felt a shiver run through me. The curse of Helltown was more than just a legend. It was a palpable force, lingering in the icy air and etched into the very fabric of the town. Determined to break the curse, I decided to conduct a ritual of remembrance, honoring Samuel and his lost family. That evening, armed with candles, photographs, and a heartfelt plea for peace, I stood in the town square. The wind howled around me, and the shadows danced menacingly in the flickering light. I began to speak, recounting the story of Samuel Whitaker, his love for his family, and the tragedy that had befallen them. As I spoke, the temperature dropped further, and the air grew thick with an oppressive presence. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent. "Stay! Don't leave us!" The statue of Samuel seemed to come alive, his outstretched arms reaching towards me. The shadows coalesced into dark figures, the spirits of the lost family surrounding me, their eyes filled with sorrow and pain. Tears welled up in my eyes as I continued the ritual, my voice breaking with emotion. "Samuel, your family deserves peace. Let go of your pain, and let this town heal." The spirits swirled around me, their presence both terrifying and beautiful. The whispers softened, transforming into gentle sighs of relief. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a serene calm that enveloped the town square. Slowly, the shadows dissipated, and the statue of Samuel stood silent once more. The whispers ceased, leaving behind a profound sense of peace. I felt the weight of the curse lifting, the spirits finding the closure they had long been denied. As dawn broke over Helltown, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the gray clouds, illuminating the snow-covered landscape in a warm, golden glow. The town felt different, lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Agnes watched me with a grateful smile, her eyes reflecting the newfound tranquility. "You did it," she said softly. "Samuel and his family can finally rest." I nodded, overwhelmed by the emotional journey I had undertaken. The curse of Helltown was broken, not through force, but through understanding and compassion. The shadows that once haunted the town were gone, replaced by the gentle light of a new beginning. As I packed my belongings to leave, I took one last look at Helltown, a place once shrouded in darkness now basking in the glow of peace. The legends of roaming shadows and curses would remain a part of its history, but they no longer held power over the lives of those who called it home. Driving away from Helltown, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had taught me that sometimes, the most powerful way to overcome darkness is to honor those who have been lost and to seek understanding in the face of the unknown. And as the snow-covered pines receded into the distance, I knew that the spirits of Helltown had found the peace they so desperately sought, their whispers now a distant memory carried away by the winter wind. Story number 6. Whispers of the Arang Medan. I've always been drawn to the mysteries of the sea, the endless horizon where water meets sky, concealing secrets beneath its glassy surface. So, when I received the assignment to investigate the haunting of the Arang Medan, a cargo ship that vanished in 1947, couldn't resist. The story had captured the imagination of many, an entire crew found dead, eyes wide open, as if witnessing something unspeakable. Local legends whispered of a curse, a malevolent force that claimed their lives during a brutal winter storm in the treacherous waters of the South China Sea. As a seasoned paranormal investigator, I had encountered my fair share of unexplained phenomena. But the Arang Medan case stood out. The ship was found adrift, all radio communications silenced, and no signs of struggle or violence. Theories ranged from secret military experiments gone wrong to encounters with supernatural entities. Determined to uncover the truth, I boarded the research vessel destined for the site where the Arang Medan was last seen. The journey was long and arduous, the weather unkind as we navigated through choppy seas and biting cold. The crew was tight-lipped, wary of the ship's dark history. On the third night, as we settled into the cramped cabins, the first signs of unease began to surface. Unexplained noises echoed through the ship, whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls, footsteps in empty corridors, and fleeting shadows that danced just beyond the edge of my vision. I chalked it up to the isolation and the oppressive atmosphere, common in haunted locales. But as days turned into nights, the phenomena intensified. Instruments malfunctioned without reason, and electronic devices flickered with static. The crew became increasingly anxious, their skepticism waning as fear took hold. One evening, as a fierce storm raged outside, I decided to explore the ship's remnants, hoping to find clues that could explain the tragedy. Navigating through the debris-strewn decks, I stumbled upon the ship's bridge, its control panels corroded by salt water and time. The eerie silence was broken only by the howling wind and the relentless pounding of waves against the hull. I set up my equipment, scanning for any signs of residual energy or lingering spirits. That's when I saw it. A shadowy figure standing at the helm, gazing out into the storm with hollow eyes. My heart raced as I approached, the temperature dropping noticeably. "Can you see me?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond, merely turning to face me. His presence was oppressive, a palpable force that seemed to drain the warmth from the air. I felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow and despair emanating from it, a silent plea for help that resonated deep within my soul. Suddenly, the whispers crescendoed into a chorus of anguished voices, their words indistinct but filled with pain. The ship seemed to come alive around me, the very essence of the Arang Medan clinging to the present, unable to let go of its tragic past. I realized then that the curse wasn't just a legend, it was a reality, a force that bound the spirits of the crew to their watery grave. Determined to communicate, I activated my EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, recorder, hoping to capture any messages from beyond. The device crackled to life, picking up faint voices that grew clearer with each passing second. "Help us. Don't leave us." Tears welled in my eyes as the weight of their suffering pressed down on me. I knew I had to find a way to release them from their eternal torment. Recalling ancient rituals and modern techniques, I began to perform a cleansing ceremony, combining prayers with the energy work I had honed over years of practice. As I chanted, the storm outside intensified, the ship groaning under the fury of nature. The shadowy figure moved towards me, its expression shifting from sorrow to hope. The whispers turned into harmonious voices, their pain transforming into gratitude. The oppressive energy began to lift, replaced by a serene calm that enveloped the ship. "Thank you," the figure whispered, its voice now gentle and free of anguish. "We can finally rest." A blinding light filled the bridge, and the ship seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The spirits of the Arang Medan were free, their tragic story finally acknowledged and honored. The storm subsided, leaving behind a tranquil sea and a ship at peace. As dawn broke, I stood on the deck, watching the first rays of sunlight pierce through the dissipating clouds. The Arang Medan, once a symbol of mystery and horror, now stood silent and serene, its curse lifted by compassion and understanding. The crew had been remembered, their suffering acknowledged, allowing their spirits to find the peace they so desperately sought. Returning to the mainland, I carried with me the lessons learned from the Arang Medan. The sea holds countless secrets, each wave a whisper of stories untold and lives lost. But it's our duty to listen, to honor those who've passed, and to ensure that their voices are never forgotten. Years later, the story of the Arang Medan became a testament to the enduring power of empathy and the thin veil between the living and the dead. As I share my experience, I hope it serves as a reminder that even in the darkest of times, understanding and compassion can bridge the gap between worlds, bringing closure and peace to those who linger in the shadows of the past. Story number 7. Whispers of Dyatlov Pass. Winter in the Ural Mountains was unforgiving, a relentless force that stripped the landscape of its vibrant hues, leaving behind a monochrome expanse of snow and ice. I had always been fascinated by the legends that shrouded Dyatlov Pass, tales whispered around campfires and shared among mountaineers eager to conquer its treacherous slopes. But nothing could have prepared me for the haunting truth that awaited those who dared to venture into its depths. I was part of a small expedition team, 9 strong, each of us driven by a mix of ambition, curiosity, and the unspoken need to prove ourselves against nature's most formidable challenges. Our goal was to traverse the pass during the heart of winter, a feat that few had attempted and even fewer had survived. The allure of the untouched wilderness and the promise of discovering something extraordinary pushed us forward, despite the warnings etched into the very fabric of the region's history. The journey began smoothly enough. The initial days were filled with camaraderie and the exhilaration of conquering each day's hurdles. We set up our base camp near the edge of the pass, the sprawling expanse before us both beautiful and ominous. The towering peaks loomed in the distance, their jagged edges piercing the heavy snowfall that blanketed everything in sight. The air was crisp, each breath a reminder of the isolation we had willingly embraced. As we delved deeper into the pass, the weather took a turn for the worse. Unpredictable snowstorms began to batter us, reducing visibility to mere feet and transforming the landscape into a blinding white void. Our progress slowed, each step forward a battle against the biting cold and the treacherous terrain. The nights were the most challenging, the darkness enveloping us in a suffocating embrace, broken only by the flickering flames of our campfires and the distant howls of the wind. It was on the 5th night that the whispers began. First, they were faint, barely audible over the storm's fury, a soft, indistinct murmuring that seemed to come from the very walls of our tents. We dismissed them as the wind playing tricks on our exhausted minds, the isolation taking its toll. But as the days turned into nights, the whispers grew louder, more persistent, threading their way into our dreams and waking hours alike. One evening, as we huddled around the campfire, the whispers reached a crescendo. A voice, clear and sorrowful, pierced through the howling wind. "Stay! Don't leave!" pleaded, sending shivers down my spine. We exchanged uneasy glances, the unspoken fear palpable among us. Doubts began to surface. Had we underestimated the pass? Was there something malevolent lurking in the shadows, intent on keeping us trapped within its icy grip? Determined to maintain our composure, we pushed forward, our steps resolute despite the mounting dread. The deeper we ventured, the more the landscape seemed to close in around us, the snowdrifts forming unnatural shapes and the trees contorting into grotesque figures against the darkened sky. Our equipment became unreliable, compasses spinning erratically and GPS devices failing without warning. It was as if the very essence of the pass sought to disorient and confound us, a silent guardian protecting its secrets. On the 7th day, exhaustion and paranoia took their toll, tempers flared, and the once solid bonds of friendship began to fray under the relentless pressure. One night, as a particularly fierce storm raged outside. Tragedy struck. A blinding flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed by a deafening crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundation of our camp. In the chaos that ensued, one of our own, Ivan, vanished without a trace, his disappearance leaving a gaping hole in our already fragile morale. Panic set in as we frantically searched for Ivan, the storm making every movement perilous. Hours passed with no sign of him, and the whispers intensified, their sorrowful pleas morphing into anguished cries. It was then that we stumbled upon the remnants of a campsite, eerily familiar in its arrangement, a stark reminder of our own struggles against the unforgiving wilderness. Among the debris, we found a tattered journal, its pages filled with frantic scrawls detailing a similar expedition and a growing sense of dread that culminated in a desperate plea for help. As night fell once more, the whispers coalesced into clear, haunting voices. "Stay! Don't leave!" they echoed, reverberating through our minds and hearts. Fear took hold, the realization dawning upon us that we were not alone in our suffering. The past had claimed Ivan, and now it seemed intent on taking us one by one, binding us to its eternal winter. Desperation drove us to make the impossible decision to turn back, to abandon our quest and seek safety from the malevolent forces that had already taken so much from us. The journey home was a harrowing ordeal, each step forward a testament to our will to survive against the relentless assault of nature and the unseen spirits that haunted the pass. The whispers followed us, a constant reminder of the thin veil between life and death, reality and nightmare. When we finally emerged from the pass, broken and battered, the dawn broke with a semblance of hope. The sun pierced through the storm clouds, casting a warm glow on the snow-covered landscape that had been our prison. We limped towards civilization, the memories of those lost and the whispers of Dyatlov Pass etched indelibly into our souls. In the years that followed, the tragedy at Dyatlov Pass became a cautionary tale among mountaineers and adventurers. The unexplained disappearances and the eerie phenomena that surrounded them fueled legends of curses and restless spirits guarding the pass against intruders. But for those of us who survived, the experience remained a haunting reminder of the fragility of life and the unforgiving power of nature. Sometimes, when the wind howls through the mountains and the snow begins to fall, I can almost hear the whispers of Dyatlov Pass calling out to me, a ghostly echo of a night that forever changed my understanding of fear and survival. The pass stands as a silent sentinel, its dark secrets hidden beneath layers of ice and snow, waiting for the next brave souls to heed its sorrowful plea, "Stay, don't leave."